For 43 years, the world was told Natalie Wood simply slipped off her yacht and drowned. But what if I told you the bruises on her body and a suppressed witness testimony prove it was never an accident? Today, we expose the lie that kept a Hollywood killer in the shadows for 4 decades. We need to go back to the dark, freezing waters off the coast of Catalina Island on Thanksgiving weekend in 1981. The yacht was named the Splendour, an ironic title for a vessel that would become a floating crime scene. Aboard were 4 people: Natalie Wood, a cinematic icon beloved by millions; her husband, television star Robert Wagner; her co-star and current leading man Christopher Walken; and the boat's captain, Dennis Davern. The official story, the one printed in every newspaper around the globe and stamped onto a death certificate by the Los Angeles County coroner, was simple and utterly tragic. They claimed that after a night of heavy drinking, Natalie retired to her cabin. Bothered by the sound of a small rubber dinghy banging against the hull of the yacht, she supposedly wandered out onto the slick, rain-swept deck in the middle of the night, wearing only a nightgown, socks, and a heavy red down jacket. According to this narrative, she slipped while trying to retie the dinghy, struck her head, fell into the freezing Pacific Ocean, and drowned while the 3 men oblivious to her struggle slept soundly below deck. For decades, the public swallowed this story because it had the neat, clean edges of a tragic accident. But when you apply even the slightest amount of critical thinking and modern forensic analysis to this sequence of events, the entire narrative violently collapses. Let us start with the most glaring, physically impossible flaw in the official timeline. Natalie Wood was clinically, paralyzingly terrified of dark water. This was not a mild discomfort. This was a lifelong, documented phobia so severe that she refused to swim in her own backyard pool. Her terror was rooted in a childhood trauma. Her superstitious mother had visited a fortune teller who predicted that Natalie would die by drowning in dark water. Her mother drilled this terrifying prophecy into her head. Later, as a child actress on the set of the film The Green Promise, a bridge stunt went horribly wrong, dumping her into a rushing river where she nearly drowned and suffered a shattered wrist. That bone healed incorrectly, leaving a permanent protrusion she spent her entire life hiding beneath heavy bracelets. Natalie Wood would not even go near the edge of a boat at night. The idea that this deeply traumatized woman, who was petrified of the ocean, would voluntarily step out onto a slippery, unguarded wooden swim step in pitch-black darkness, in the middle of a freezing rainstorm, to fiddle with the ropes of a dinghy, defies every single psychological profile ever established about her. Stop for a second. If you think this is just a story about a phobia and a tragic misstep in the dark, you are falling for the exact same diversion tactic the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department fell for in 1981. Because what if I told you that a highly suppressed autopsy detail reveals she did not fall off that boat at all? What if I told you the yacht's captain finally broke a 30-year silence to confess a terrifying truth about the minutes before she vanished? The truth about the physical violence that occurred in the yacht's stateroom changes absolutely everything, and what the original coroner purposely ignored to protect a Hollywood kingpin will make your blood run cold. We are not looking at a drowning. We are looking at a masterclass in crime scene manipulation and a massive institutional cover-up. Let us pull back the curtain on the medical evidence. The original coroner, Thomas Noguchi, famously known as the coroner to the stars, rushed to rule the death an accidental drowning. He documented the fresh bruising on her body, a dark bruise on her right forearm, scratches on her neck, and a significant, fresh abrasion on her left cheek. Noguchi publicly theorized that these injuries occurred while she desperately tried to pull herself out of the water and into the rubber dinghy. But modern forensic pathologists, who successfully petitioned to have the case reopened and the death certificate officially changed in 2012, looked at those exact same photographs and came to a chillingly different conclusion. The bruise patterns were defensive. A bruise requires a pumping heart to form properly. The deep contusions on her arms and the scrape on her face were consistent with someone who had been violently grabbed, assaulted, and thrown, not someone who passively scraped against a rubber boat while treading water. The modern medical examiners confirmed that these injuries occurred prior to her entering the ocean. They were peri-mortem, inflicted in the brutal moments just before she went into the water. And then we have the witnesses, the voices that law enforcement actively silenced. Anchored just a short distance away from the Splendour was a boat called the Capricorn. Aboard was a woman named Marilyn, At approximately 11:05 that night, she heard the unmistakable sound of a woman screaming for her life. Wayne reported hearing a woman crying out, "Help me, someone please help me, I am drowning." Wayne also heard the voice of a man, slurring heavily, yelling back out into the darkness, "Take it easy, we will be over to get you." Wayne immediately contacted the harbor patrol, but her cries for intervention were ignored. In the weeks following the death, she received a threatening note shoved into her mailbox, warning her to keep her mouth shut if she valued her safety. The Los Angeles Sheriff's Department never followed up on her sworn statement. They swept it entirely under the rug because it completely obliterated Robert Wagner's timeline. Now we must examine the explosive timeline of the yacht's captain, Dennis Davern, and the agonizing 2.5-hour delay that sealed Natalie Wood's fate. For decades, Davern stuck to the script he was handed by Hollywood lawyers. He even lived in Robert Wagner's guest house for a year following the tragedy, kept under the close, watchful eye of Wagner's security team. It is a classic containment strategy utilized by power brokers to ensure a witness does not flip. But guilt is a heavy burden, and Davern eventually cracked. He revealed that the atmosphere on the boat that night was suffocatingly toxic. Wagner was intensely jealous of Christopher Walken, enraged by a perceived emotional affair between Walken and his wife. Davern stated that a massive, violent argument erupted in the salon. Wagner smashed a wine bottle on the table, screaming at Walken, "Do you want to sleep with my wife?" Walken retreated to his cabin and locked the door. Davern then witnessed Wagner and Natalie Wood fighting aggressively on the aft deck. The screaming was intense, and then, suddenly, there was dead silence. What happened next is the most damning piece of evidence in this entire 43-year saga. When Wagner returned to the cabin alone, he told Davern that Natalie was gone. But he did not panic. He did not tell Davern to turn on the massive searchlights mounted on the top of the Splendour. He did not immediately radio the Coast Guard. In fact, Davern testified that Wagner explicitly ordered him not to turn on the searchlights and not to use the radio, essentially commanding him to leave it alone. The first official call for help was not made until 1:30 in the morning. That is a 2.5-hour delay. In the freezing, turbulent waters of the Pacific Ocean, a 2-hour delay in launching a search and rescue protocol is not an oversight. It's an intentional death sentence. Natalie Wood was wearing a heavy red down jacket. When that jacket became saturated with seawater, it essentially turned into a 40-pound anchor. Forensic recreations of the event show that she likely treaded water, terrified, freezing, and exhausted, for over 30 minutes, crying out for the husband who stood on the deck of a yacht mere yards away, choosing to do absolutely nothing. The mechanics of the dinghy further completely destroy the accident theory. The dinghy was found miles away the next morning. Its ignition switch was turned off. Its oars were firmly tied down. If Natalie Wood had somehow fallen while trying to board the dinghy to escape a violent argument, she would have untied the oars or attempted to start the motor. The state of the dinghy proves she was never in it. It was untied and allowed to drift away to create a false trail, a manufactured excuse to explain why she was in the water. The implications of this case stretch far beyond the tragic loss of a single actress. It is a case study in how wealth, celebrity, and influence can entirely paralyze the justice system. The initial 1981 investigation by the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department was a masterclass in deferential treatment. They allowed Robert Wagner to dictate the terms of his own interrogation. They accepted the story of 3 heavily intoxicated men without separating them to compare their statements. They failed to secure the yacht as a crime scene, allowing potential trace evidence to be washed away or destroyed by Wagner's staff the very next day. This case fundamentally shifted the way we view historical true crime. It tapped into a psychological phenomenon we call the correction of history, where the public collective consciousness demands that historical wrongs be scientifically righted. It forces us to acknowledge that the nostalgic, glamorous facade of classic Hollywood was often maintained by fixers, corrupt officials, and a compliant media willing to look the other way when a powerful man committed a heinous act. The fact that the Los Angeles County coroner physically altered the historical death certificate in 2012, changing the cause of death from accidental to drowning and other undetermined factors, is monumentally significant. In the world of medical examiners, changing a historical document requires an absolutely insurmountable burden of proof. It is a quiet, bureaucratic admission that the original investigation was a sham. This overwhelming wave of new forensic scrutiny is precisely why the Sheriff's Department officially named Robert Wagner a person of interest in 2018, permanently shattering his untouchable legacy. Natalie Wood did not simply slip away into the dark ocean by mistake. She was thrust into her ultimate nightmare, left to fight the freezing waves alone, while the people who could have saved her chose silence. The dark water may have taken her life, but the calculated cover-up robbed her of justice. We are finally stripping away the glamour to expose the violent reality hidden beneath. If you want to see exactly how deep the rabbit hole of Hollywood cover-ups goes, and how studios routinely manipulated crime scenes to protect their biggest assets, you need to look into the locked room mystery of Superman actor George Reeves next. The truth there is just as dark, and the lies are just as deep. Keep questioning the official story, because history is always written by the survivors.